Welcome to Geek on Film with your host, Robbie Holmes. Welcome to episode 41 of Geek on Film. This is Robbie, and I'll be solo this week. We're going to talk about a little bit of television. We're going to talk a couple of films, including our main review of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I'm going to return to our friends over on Discovery Plus. This week, watched episode 3 of Hometown Takeover Season 2. The episode's titled Welcome Party. We get the Marses there again, working on a couple of projects, including renovating one of the town's couples that support people who are moving there, and they renovate their home. This is the Apamales, and it's a pretty amazing family who takes in people who are visiting or who are coming there for the first time. And then there's a whole bunch of other things. There's a bowling alley that gets renovated, and we get a walking garden to take over a parking lot that's not been in use for a while. So they're starting to do some like central community renovation. They're doing some personal renovations for important people in town. And again, it's sort of it's a complete and utter like end of the night. We're ready to go to bed, but we would like to watch one more thing and smile. It's super heartwarming. Keep on keeping on. If you haven't seen it, jump over there. I haven't really talked about Ted Lasso in the last couple weeks. I am currently up to date. I've definitely watched the last two. We'll Never Have Paris is a really interesting episode where we get to see Ted's family and Dr. Jacob coming to him and then going on to Paris. And this causes Ted some consternation about what's going to happen in Paris. And he assumes that there's going to be a proposal from Dr. Jacob. And that doesn't unfurl that way. We also have the storyline with Keely, where there's an online leak of a video of hers that's not handled very well by Jack, her girlfriend who she's dating. And it's really shining a spotlight on how much Jack is not a good supportive partner, in my opinion. I think the most poignant moment in the episode is when Jamie comes to basically say, like, I'm sorry, are you okay? And I'm sorry it got leaked from my account. I deleted it off my phone, and I'm really sorry. I'm sorry this happened to you. And that was just it. He was there to apologize, but he was there to make sure she was okay. It's really charming. I hope, we land the plane here. People are not super happy with this last episode. I think it was charming. It has its own storylines that are kind of unique and a little bit different. We get some really cute moments with Coach Beard and Ted's son discussing, Hey Jude and what it means, and singing Hey Jude with him in front of a pub. It's a really cute show. I know there's a lot of people that really love Ted Lasso. I really enjoy it in the moment. It feels like so much television that I can just consume and forget about. It's not something that like lingers with me. It's not something I feel I think about a whole heck of a lot until the next episode, but it's a really fun distraction. And I don't know that I smile more every hour right now that I'm watching television than I do with Ted Lasso. Hopefully they can land this plane. Let's move over to something that is definitely landing the plane. Secession. We had episode number 7 of season 4, Tailgate, which is the pre-election party that used to be run by Logan, and it is now being run by Shiv and Tom. And it's sort of a parody of like the 40 most like important people in New York are at this party, and it doesn't really matter who wins because they're going to be fine. So you've got, news people, you've got gossip people, you've got politicians, you've got podcasts, like high-end podcasts, you've got all kinds of stuff going on in this episode. I think the interesting piece here is we get Madsen and a couple of his cronies crashing the party right as Kendall is like saying a few words and having a moment of silence for his father. It's super uncomfortable. God, I am so impressed with what Mr. Skarsgård is able to pull off episode after episode. He is phenomenal. He is so much fun as Lucas Madsen, and how much he seems to be reveling in playing this disgusting person. The episode opens up with Rava, Kendall's ex-wife, coming to talk to him about the fact that their child has been made to feel uncomfortable because of things that are happening having to do with ATN, and now she doesn't feel comfortable going to school, and she's had a bad interaction on the street. Yeah, it's a really amazing episode. There's so many reminders of this show, reminding us about every relationship that seems to be going on. You've got all of the relationships of the children. You've got Tom and Shiv have a 5 minute, like, might as well be a battle with swords on the terrace during the party, where they just eviscerate one another. They take one another down in some of the most harrowing ways. It is absolutely positively a tragedy what has happened and gone on in their relationship, and I don't know that it was ever good. And this fight really, really, I don't think is come backable from, in my opinion. But you have that relationship. You have Connor and Willa and their relationship, and it seems to be the most supportive when it comes down to it. There's some back and forth about whether or not Connor's going to drop out of the race because his small amount of the numbers in the voting may actually be hurting Jared Mencken. So Jared is back channeling Roman to try to get Connor to drop out, and that might help him. He's offering him, ambassadorships, or it's a really amazing experience. And then you see like the final relationships are like Jerry and Roman, and he goes and starts talking to her in his awkward, uncomfortable way, and they're going back and forth, and there's a lot of like frustration. And she talks about the fact that like she has hired an attorney, and they hired someone to protect her reputation, and she has all this about him that she can throw in front of the news. She's like, I have 5 years worth of dick pics of your genitalia that I can throw out there. So anything happens to my reputation, or anything is said in a negative way over the next 5 years, and I will come at you and take you down. And then at the very end, you have Kendall really going back to Frank and the relationship he has there, and saying like, let's pull a reverse Viking. Let's take down Gojo because of the numbers in India being messed up and not real. So much so that the joke is that if there were two Indias, that would be more likely to have the numbers they currently have. And all that is released into the wild by Ebba, the communications lead from Gojo, who Lucas has been sending his blood to and is kind of torturing, and Oscar is there, and he's being sort of the most blunt version of Oscar, taking out anybody and everybody around him. It's an unbelievable show that consistently surprises me how vicious and biting this group of people is to one another. We're going to jump over to the one movie I'm going to talk about this week that I saw. It was Champions. So the Woody Harrelson film Champions is a movie where he is a basketball coach who should probably be coaching in the NBA, but he is not a person who really has good soft skills. This is what it really comes down to. At one point he decides that he's going to get in a fight with the head coach because he doesn't believe. So he's the assistant coach on this team that's 3 or 4 rungs down from the NBA, and he shoves him, and it's on television. And that coach is Coach Phil Peretti, played by Ernie Hudson, and he gets fired because of this. And that night he drinks too much, and he crashes into the back of a police car while he's drunk, and he ends up getting community service, and he has to go and be a coach for 90 days of this group of children who are a basketball team who are trying to go to the Special Olympics. And the movie is really, really surprisingly charming. Caitlin Olsen plays Alex. Marcus, who's Woody Harrelson's character, and Alex obviously connected on a dating app. The movie opens with her being annoyed with him after what appears to be them having sex, about what a cretin he is. He has one book in his house, and it's about visualizations. And the interaction is very amusing. It's very like bantery, but like you're kind of a jerk. And it turns out that one of the basketball players on this team is actually her brother. That's Johnny, played by Kevin Iannucci. And the cast of this movie is so much fun. There is an amazing amount of silly, joyous fun that happens in this movie. Of course, there's the you've seen in the trailers that like the kids, they kind of have their own way of approaching things. There's so much vulnerability and honesty from these kids when he first starts meeting them. There's a really great sequence where one of the kids starts telling him about everybody else in the room, and that's pretty awesome. Like he's my best friend, and this is what he does, and this is and there's one of the basketball players who is played by Bradley Edens, and his nickname is Showtime. And he only shoots the basketball backwards towards the rim, and he always celebrates no matter whether he hits the shot or not. And really quickly, there's a really funny like back and forth that ends up happening where Woody Harrelson's character goes like, "How often does he hit those?" And the kid who's telling him about everything that's happening and everything that's been going on says, I've known him for 5 years and he's not even hit the backboard or the rim. He's due. And there's just like this unbridled optimism in this movie that comes across that I wish we could have more of. I really genuinely enjoyed this movie. I watched it with my wife and my mother-in-law, and it was just really effortlessly charming. There's a couple of things that get a little unbelievable and a little crazy, like the way they get the kids to go to the regional championships for the Special Olympics is by blackmailing a restaurateur basically. And it seemed like they were going to maybe do like a show because Alex is an actress who does Shakespeare, and that was where I was expecting this to go, and it didn't go that way at all. This movie has so much charm and so much to offer. Again, like we had myself, my wife, and my mother-in-law, and all of us were smiling and enjoying this film. If you're looking for an easy watch that can do nothing but make you smile, give it a chance. It's on Peacock. It's a really fun movie. I think that's it for me this week. It's been a quieter week for me on the film front. I went and saw while I was out with visiting both my mother and my mother-in-law this weekend because we're busy next weekend for Mother's Day. While my mother-in-law and my wife spent some time together, I got a chance to sneak over to a theater in Winchester, the AMC Apple Blossom. And I got to see this movie in Big D, which is a format I have never heard of before. It turns out it's probably like RPX, like a step down from RPX in the Regal space, maybe a step down from Dolby Digital at most theaters. It's definitely not IMAX. It's a slightly larger theater with very loud sound. I don't know how I would classify its quality, but it was a lot of sound on a slightly bigger screen than you're used to. So on to the main review. This is James Gunn's swan song at Marvel, the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And we have this movie sort of taking place right after the Christmas special that was on Disney Plus that you probably should have watched before this movie. There's a lot of conversation going on about who these movies are for today. And even though this movie doesn't require you to know hundreds and hundreds of characters and have watched 20 something films, it does kind of require you to have seen, I don't know, 7 films and a television movie. So it's starting to feel like, or this franchise, to not require you to have all this overhead, really like homework, feels like you eventually are at the point where homework is now required. There's too much history. There's too much going on here for you not to understand the implications, or in order to understand the implications of what's going on, that you are pressed to know a lot of information. I will say my initial gut reaction on this film walking out was it felt like a slightly overblown version of what we got in the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special, mixed with like a 1970s sci-fi film, like a Roger Corman film with a big budget. It's a really strange mix for me of a movie that I don't know is made to support this being a family film. It is PG-13. It's the first F bomb in a Marvel movie. But that is not what is concerning here. I think the bigger concern is how much happens in this movie that is like extremely off-putting, including like animal torture. There's there's so much in this film. There's like some dystopian like body horror that ends up happening. It is not what I was expecting going into this movie. Maybe that is why I am having a harder time wrapping my head around it. I saw it 2 days ago, and it is probably grown slightly in my estimation since I saw it. But when I left the theater, I think it was like a 3-star movie in my opinion, and three and a half stars, and I wasn't sure there was a heart on that. If you know the letterbox 5-star rating system. So this movie, we meet the High Evolutionary, and he has created Rocket, and it appears as though some other animal creatures. But what we find out early on is that he has also created entire races of aliens. So, like the Sovereign, which we met in Guardians of the Galaxy 2. And on the Sovereign Nation, or with the Sovereign, he had created Adam Warlock, who is played in this film by Will Poulter. And he is basically like a super heroic sovereign, almost like think Marvel or something like that from the comics. And he in the comic books is a little bit different. He has the Soul Stone in his head. There's a gem in his head that powers him in the comic books, and in this movie there is a gem there, but there's no discussion of what it is. And when Adam Warlock attacks them on Nowhere, which is where we found them at the end of the holiday special, and that's where they have been living, which is now their headquarters. He attacks and sort of shreds the Guardians pretty quickly, and really seriously wounds Rocket. And in the process, they go to Nebula. Eventually turns her arm into a sword and slams it through Adam Warlock and forces him to back off. But when they go to put a meta pack on Rocket, he almost dies because there's a kill switch around his heart. Because according to what they find out, when Nebula connects to Rocket's internal kill switch, he is property of a company called Orgocorp, and it has a kill switch to protect its intellectual property. Immediately, Star Lord decides they're going to go to Orgocorp with no plan in place. In the trailer, you've seen some very funny back and forth between Drax and Peter Quill, where he says, you know, we're going to kill everyone. And he's like, we're not going to kill anybody. And he's like, we're going to kill some people. And he's like, we're not going to kill some people. He's like, we're going to kill one guy nobody loves. And he's like, you're just making it sad, man. Which is sort of some very James Gunny dialogue, there's no doubt. And it feels very fun. I think he really does have the voice of Drax. And I find that Peter Quill, written by and directed by James Gunn, is much more charming and much more approachable than he is in other aspects. So they head off to this planet. We start to get some flashbacks throughout the whole process where we see how the High Evolutionary created Rocket. And we see, you know, all these little vignettes or like little snippets of his past, where we get to see and meet, you know, the people who become his found family at that point in his life. There's an otter, Lila. There's a walrus who's in a sort of metallic wheelchair with wheels called Teefs. And then there's a rabbit named Floor who has like a giant metal cage over his mouth, or their mouth. So the whole time, the High Evolutionary and his people are experimenting on these creatures and torturing them with very little regard for who they are. And slowly they start to be able to communicate more effectively, and they become friends. And this is something I've seen or heard some other podcasters talk about, where they feel like this is extremely emotionally manipulative. We are pretty sure these characters are not going to make it out of this movie, and we are falling in love with these adorable creatures. We're hearing them name themselves. right? So, all the characters name themselves. And then what we had seen earlier was Rocket watching out the window as a ship takes off and a rocket takes off, and he asks about it. This is where we hear that, like, I'm going to build a ship, and me and my friends are going to fly away, and that's why I'm going to be, that's why I'm called Rocket. And it's really cute and manipulative. There's no doubt about that. So we cut back to other things that are going on, and they're supposed to be heading towards Ogocorp and Orgocorp, and we find out that the Ravagers have intercepted their ship because Nebula had reached out to the alternate version of Gamora, who is on that ship. So we get a nice Sly Stallone cameo here as the head of the Ravagers. Gamora is part of this found family of the Ravagers, and she becomes their escort to getting into Orgocorp, where we get more awesome cameos. We've got some Nathan Fillion here playing sort of a security guard boss guy. And so we get, some real fun Nathan Fillion quips. In an alternate dimension, I am sure that he played Peter Quill. Boy, it was fun to see him standing off against this group of people and getting directed by James Gunn. Yeah, so they make their way through this portion of the level, is what it feels like. It feels like a video game. So they go and retrieve Rocket's file, which is what they were there for, because they need the passcode to allow it to take off the MacGuffin. I mean, the thing that's wrapped around his heart that will kill him if they try to save him. This leads to them finding out that the file has been removed, and it appears as though it may have been uploaded into the head hard drive of one of the High Evolutionary's minions. So they get the information to then go and follow to find the High Evolutionary ship. When they follow and get there, they realize that the planet looks an awful lot like Earth. And we find out from like the on-screen depiction that this is counter Earth. And we get there, and it's where all the creatures that they were trying to make, that the High Evolutionary was trying to create, have been stood up. So they're all like humanoid-like animal creatures. They've been evolved. They have families. They have jobs. It looks like suburbia. They realize what's going on. They need to get to the High Evolutionary ship, and that is Peter and Groot go to try to get the file out of the head of one of the High Evolutionary's minions. Seems a little convoluted because it kind of is. We then flash back to when Rocket breaks out, when he's about to save himself. And he also figures something out that the High Evolutionary can't figure out about why when they evolve these creatures, they have a rage in them that is not programmed as part of what they're doing. And he figures out that the ratios are wrong of some chemical A and chemical B creates chemical C. And that means that they're rage filled. And when they make the change, he's able to evolve these creatures with no anger, no rage built into them. We then are in a like super crazy chess match where Peter and Groot are waiting to talk to or attack the minion who has the file in his head. The High Evolutionary attacks, and Groot previously had been handed Peter's guns and slowly unfurls his body to show us that there are 10 guns, and he hands 2 to Peter, and he's shooting guns all over the place. So we've got a multi-arm action Groot that is protecting Peter and able to take down an awful lot of people. In this process, they don't lose. They eventually get the file out. They pop the hard drive out of this person's head after he's been killed, and we then get Groot and Peter Quill dive out of this giant ship that's taken off with no plan, including taking that person. That's what it is. They take the High Evolutionary's minion, and they dive out of the ship, and Groot builds wings out of his wood and catches Peter, who's holding on to that guy, and they basically smash him through into the ground and pop out his hard drive. Um, then we get back to Mantis and Drax. Drax are supposed to be staying with the ship. They don't. They drive a motorcycle over to the big ship where Nebula is outside because she wasn't let in because she is a weapon. There's no way to disarm her. And this leads to them trying to break into the ship. And we get this really great battle slash fight amongst this trio where, Drax is called out for being dumb by Nebula, and she's really angry with him for leaving the ship, and they could all die, and our friends could die. And Mantis basically says, stop picking on him. He's stupid. It's not his fault. And you get this really great moment of like Drax being sad and even asking like, you think I'm dumb? And she makes him forget. And then we get back to Drax not having the weight of this conversation on him. But while they're inside, they come across all these children who don't speak whatever language they are speaking. And pretty quickly, Mantis and Nebula falter trying to communicate with these children. And Drax walks over and immediately starts to like communicate with them, speaking their language, but also making them laugh and making them. You get this like really beautiful moment where you see that like Drax was a father and knows how to communicate with kids, and tells them all to stay away from the wall on the starboard side of the ship because they're going to try to break in. At that point, we have Gamora left on the ship, and she drives the ship to their ship to the high evolutionary ship and smashes a hole through the wall. And we then get the call to nowhere, where Kraglin and Cosmo are the sort of recognizable figures, and basically the Guardians need nowhere to come there to get the creatures and the kids off of this ship. And you get a really great moment of the battle taking place between all these characters, and Kraglin getting to be a little heroic at this point, who is Yondu's brother, the person who he inherited Yondu's fan for his head and the whistling needle. And earlier in the movie, there was a back and forth between him and Cosmo, saying that Cosmo was a bad dog, and she is very unhappy about this. There's a great line where she's just like, the Russians, they sent me to space, and I was gonna die on impact, and I was gonna burn up when I was coming back, and they're bad dogs. I am not a bad dog. And it's really cute. And he finally says like, Cosmo's a good dog. And then Cosmo uses her telekinesis to pull the high evolutionary ship and nowhere together so that they can start unloading these kids. In the process, we have gotten Rocket back to safety. He has been released. And we're back on the high evolutionary ship where everything is going down. And we have a final sort of battle that ends up taking place with the needle drop or heading to the final battle with a needle drop of the Beastie Boys' No Sleep Till Brooklyn, which is the second time that needle drop has happened in two popular films in the last 2 months. It was also in Super Mario Brothers, and I, like everybody else, would love to see the Beastie Boys continue to get paid and to leverage all their amazing music, but it's a little too much too quickly is what it feels like to me. If only they hadn't had that needle drop in Super Mario Brothers, it would have been a little more impactful here, I think. Everybody in the battle then gets this like slow-mo session where we get to see how awesome they are, including Gamora becomes a part of all this, where, what triggers all this is that Rocket says like, I'm not going to run anymore. And he turns and starts walking, and all of the Guardians slowly file in behind him in support. So we end up in a situation where they take down the high evolutionary, they fight him. And earlier we had seen in the movie, after he breaks out Lila and Toofs and Floor, the high evolutionary kills all three of them. And Rocket attacks him and scratches his face. And we've seen that his face is sort of held on. Well, the skin of his face seems to be held on. And they beat the crap out of the high evolutionary and eventually peel his face off. So you have this really like body horror-esque scene where he's talking And what's really interesting is we get that moment where like Rocket has the opportunity to kill him, and he's like, I won't kill him because I'm a guardian, and just seems a little shoddy logic, given the fact that they were just killing everything and everyone around. And then also there's the creatures that they decide they're going to take the higher life forms, and eventually Rocket's like, we have to go back and save my friends and everybody. And in that moment, he finds that they had said at one point he was a clone, and we find a whole bunch of what look like little rockets. And on the door, it says the species. It's from North America on Earth, and it's a raccoon. So he owns his name of Rocket Raccoon from that point forward. Lots of crazy things ensue. There's really feel good finale. Rocket connects to Nowhere speakers after the finale where everybody is saved, and plays like Florence and the Machines, over the head of Nowhere. And we get all of the Guardians coming together and saying that this is sort of a last hurrah for Peter. He's going to go home to Earth, and he's going to go see his grandfather. And Mantis is going to go off and figure out what Mantis wants to do. She was doing whatever Ego wanted, and then whatever the Guardians wanted, and now she's going to figure out what she wants to do. Drax offers to go with her, and she's like, no. And then we get Nebula saying, like, Drax, I need you here. Your superpower is not being a destroyer, it's being a dad. And that's really charming. And he's there with all these little kids that were for the new race that was going to populate the next planet that the High Evolutionary was creating. It's cool and fun. And then we get a post-credit scene where we see what looks like the new Guardians team, where they all had previously said that Rocket was going to be the new captain of the Guardians. And you're left with one of those children who's fives, and then Adam Warlock and Kraglin and Groot and Rocket. Yeah, it was fun-ish, smiley, but not. It seemed a little hollow to me, to be honest. And then the final post-credit scene is that we see Peter with his grandfather, and we get that the legendary Star-Lord will return, which somebody on one of the podcasts I listened to said, like, the post-credit scene is like a contract signing notification. Yeah, I walked out of the theater. I felt a little bit like I had been, like, there's so many needle drops that are manipulating how you feel. There's so much emotional navigating of the creatures that are adorable and being tortured. The first word that Rocket says when he starts speaking is hurts. Like, there's a lot of tugging at your heartstrings in this movie. And I felt slightly manipulated as an audience member. I like the movie well enough. I think it's probably the best movie in this phase of Marvel's current phase 5, or yeah, I think it's 5. I'm really interested to see how this resonates. I was texting with John after the movie, and I said, I feel like this is going to be like this is the swan song for James Gunn, and it feels like the most James Gunn of the Marvel movies. So I don't know that Marvel really gets to claim this as much. It'll be interesting to see who gets the credit for this movie. Is it Marvel? Is it James Gunn? Is it Marvel's an idiot for letting the guy who made the best movie in phase 5 go over and head up their competitor? I'm really interested to see how this movie impacts the perception publicly of both Marvel and James Gunn and DC. I wish there was a little more in the post credits that told us something that was going on in phase 5. I would be surprised if we saw the Guardians, the new team of Guardians, probably before Secret Wars, if I had to pontificate and try to figure it out. I am sure they'll be back. There's no way that they walk away from all of this. I think Bradley Cooper's portrayal of Rocket is amazing. I wish there was a way that he could be recognized more than just like all of us showing admiration about talking about it. But what he does in this movie and in all of the 8 movies that the Guardians are a part of is astounding. Like, there's so much being done with that character with just his voice and the animation that is above and beyond even what I was expecting was possible. And this movie really dots the I's and crosses the T's when it comes to that character and all the animated characters. one of the podcasts I listened to talked about Quantumania had a lot of like, it was a giant CGI fest. It was like CGI characters interacting with other CGI characters in a CGI world. And there are large portions of this movie where that there are, rendered characters interacting with other rendered characters in a space that is not realistic. Maybe it's a green box. And there's a lot more weight in this movie than what we got in Quantumania. I think that's it for me. I think you should go see it. It had a confusing opening weekend. I think it opened to like 117 in the US, which is a little bit low. I think the previous movie had opened at like 178. I think, this is a combination of probably some Marvel fatigue and that people expect these Marvel movies to be available pretty quickly now on Disney Plus. Even though Quantumania has been very slow to get there, I'm interested to see what its legs look like. It is doing well internationally. It's also a movie that's debuted in China, which doesn't happen for every Marvel movie. I expect this will probably land. I mean, I'm not really a good prognosticator, but I would say I'd be surprised if it hit $1 billion. I'd be surprised if it got below 700 million. So my $300 million swing is pretty safe, I think, internationally and in the US. So yeah, I think this will be a hit. I think it was Drax is super fun. I think Mantis gets a chance to shine, and Nebula is super amazing. We get to see Gamora, like an alternate version of Gamora, and I think that she gets a lot more to do in this movie and really fleshes out what the distinctions are between this version of Gamora and the original one from this timeline. It was a pretty fun time at the theater, but and I really haven't given him a chance. Chukwudi Iwuji, who plays the High Evolutionary, was also on Peacemaker as the boss of the team. He's unbelievable. He is a scenery-chewing Shakespearean villain, if there has ever been one in the Marvel Universe. To see what a guy like that is getting these roles and gets a chance to chew the scenery the way he does. And, I don't know that this movie even has the 3.5 stars without him. I think having a really good villain here to go up against, who is, he has a great line where at one point, one of his minions is like, oh my God, or like, by God, take it back. Don't do that. And he's like, if there was a God, I wouldn't have had to step in. Like, he's a megalomaniacal, God complex character. And he's great. I think I'm done. This has been fun to chat. I really hope you enjoy this podcast. If you do, please rate, review. I look forward to hearing your feedback. I'm not sure where we're going next week. I think this week we have Air dropping on Amazon Prime, so I might do that. I also have to look at the schedule. Your guess is as good as mine. You'll see it in the title of the next episode. But that's it. That's me. I'm Robbie the Geek everywhere online. John is John Hoche, JONHOCHE. And we are geekonfilm.com, geekonfilm.com on Instagram and Twitter. And thanks for sticking around. It's been fun chatting to you. Have a good week. Bye-bye. This has been a Geek on Film podcast. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.